Well, how do you fix things with the Denver Broncos? And, well, I'm afraid to say, Mace, there's just certain matchups defensively as we start today's show, where defensively, I don't know how you fix it because there's certain types of teams that defensively, no matter what you do with the personnel you have, you don't really hang with that.
I agree. Now, if we have good news, everybody, you don't see these teams the rest of the way.
Right.
You
Right.
see you see some names like Ezekiel Elliott is a name that you're going to
Hunter
see.
Henry could be a problem because you can't
Yes,
cover tight ends.
I'm more worried about Henry on Sunday than Ezekiel Elliott. We'll get into that as the week progresses. But the good news here in the short term, at least for what the Broncos can control, is that they shouldn't see the type of disadvantageous situation between now and Las Vegas that they saw on Saturday night. So if they get some breaks otherwise, the postseason is still very much within grasp. But if you see the Dolphins again, if you see the Ravens, if you see even the Chiefs, and you're not generating takeaways, then you find yourself in some problematic situations. And as you said, even if you see a team like the Bengals somehow, if they keep on stacking upsets because of the number of weapons they have at various spots.
Right. Yeah, they've got like 5 weapons and they're using
Mm-hmm.
Chase Brown, that kid, more behind Joe Mixon. So that would
Yeah.
be problematic. But good news, everybody. You're facing New England. How do you fix it, Mace? To me, honestly, for the Broncos defense, it just comes down to better tackling. And I don't know how you fix that because you don't get to practice tackling. So good luck.
Yeah, not only not get to practice tackling, we are now in the phase of the season where you only get one full pad practice every 2 weeks. Because you can have a fully padded practice the first 11 weeks of the season. After that, it's one every other week per NFLPA and NFL regulations. So there, and you can only do so much, even with full pads, there's only so much because you're not tackling to the ground, right?
Hmm.
This is simply something where you're going to have to ride this out. Look, Sean Payton talked about it a couple of Fridays ago, how you have to focus on things that need to be fixed and also things that can make a difference, but you can't teach everything. Some things you have to let go, accept that it's going to be a deficiency, and figure how do you scheme around it. Now, then, as we saw on Saturday night, when you do that, that means there's a ceiling to it. We saw the
Right.
ceiling in Miami and we saw the ceiling in Detroit. But that being said, you could argue those are the two of the five best teams in football, right?
Yeah. Five's best offenses for sure.
So when you get to that second tier, I think you can take care of anybody. And truth be told, since that 1-5 start, the Broncos have taken care of almost everybody in that second tier. I mean, Cleveland's a second tier team. You got the break of playing Dorian Thompson Robinson and PJ Walker. Cleveland's a second tier team. You beat them. Minnesota's a second tier team. You're kind of lucky, but you beat them. Kansas City probably on the top of that second tier. It's weird to say they're not elite, but that doesn't look like an elite team right now. You
Right.
took care of them. And Buffalo in that second tier, although maybe they're creeping back toward that first tier where we always thought they were going to be,
Yep.
that you took care of them. That being said, I think it would be different against Buffalo if you have to go back out to Orchard Park in January.
Yeah, I'm not going to turn this into a Buffalo show, but I just wrote about it a little bit earlier today. James Cook's 221 yards from scrimmage against the Cowboys is the most since Fred Jackson in 2009. So,
Wow,
what's the
that's a
key?
blast from the past. Freddie Jackson.
And one of the few Division III players to like make it in the
Mm-hmm.
NFL. We saw him at the
Yeah,
Senior Bowl, by the way.
of course.
Of course we did.
Senior,
But
you and I in January have to do a Senior Bowl memory show. Like,
we
okay,
should. We
the
should.
guy we start going over. We start talking about like everyone from guys that became stars to guys who look great but didn't pan out. Do you remember
Right.
Matt Jones way back?
Oh yeah, of course.
Looked
One-handed
like
catch,
he
million
was
dollar catch.
transitioning from QB to receiver, was
Yep.
catching everything, getting better day to day. I'm like, oh wow, this
Hmm.
guy could be something. He goes to Jacksonville. Doesn't pan
Right.
out. That's how
Right.
it goes.
Yeah, we've got a ton of memories from that
Mm-hmm.
game, a ton coming up for you this year. Just stay tuned and to our YouTube channel, of course, like, comment, share, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. Could a personnel change happen? Let's start with the run defense. We'll get to covering tight ends in a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because I think the answer is no. But our buddy Elijah Garcia,
Mm-hmm.
could perhaps getting him a jersey and getting him on the field more defensively help the activity up front? You saw the Lions give everyone a clue. Double DJ Jones,
Mm-hmm.
gash the Broncos on the ground. Is there
Yeah.
any sort of personnel that you believe could help change that? We did see, Jaquan McMillan playing more, PJ Locke
Mm-hmm.
playing more. These personnel changes did help the Broncos defense. I think they're out of moves, Mace, but I just want to talk about Elijah Garcia with you.
You know what? This is a time where you say, okay, who's a high ceiling player where you may have to live with some mistakes as they grow? Like, look, we love Matt Henningsen. Matt Henningsen is a good rotational player. That is who he is. It's fine. I think Matt Henningsen's on this team next year and the year after as a rotational defensive lineman. But what is his ceiling compared to Elijah Garcia? I think Elijah Garcia's ceiling is up here, but there's a wider variance in how he plays.
Right.
And we could
Right.
even see that watching him in training camp in the preseason. I mean, frankly, in training camp, it wasn't looking great for Elijah Garcia. Then he got out there at game time. You always say, okay, what happens when the lights go on? The lights went on in Arizona, and he was tremendous. I mean, I think he made the team based on what he did in that preseason opener against the Cardinals. So if you accept that there are going to be some MEs out there as he's finding his way, you know what MEs stand for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. For those who don't know, mental errors.
Yes.
Okay. Look, every young player has MEs. Just does. That's his part of learning how to succeed in the game at this level. So you live with that and you let him grow and see where his ceiling is. I mean, I honestly I am really surprised we have not seen more of Garcia because the
Me too.
flashes on him were high level.
Right.
He's got 3 or 4 good pass rush moves. But where he has to improve, and this goes back to, okay, we're talking about the run defense. That's the area he has to grow. And I wonder if that is why we haven't seen a lot of him. But you're getting gashed anyway, right? I mean, if you just gave up 6.6 yards per carry, Cease, you're leading the league in a bad way in average per carry allowed, 5.2 yards. If that average persists, you're going to be one of only 10 teams since 1977 to allow at least 5.2 yards per attempt for a season. You're almost certainly going to have the worst rushing yardage per attempt against you in Bronco history. What are you clinging to here, right? It's
Right.
okay to change things up because right now, in that aspect of the game, the holes are so wide. And Sean Payton talked about gap integrity yesterday. But he said that's just the start of it, right? He didn't want to get into the end of it. Like clearly,
No.
he was getting toward the end of his rope at that conference call,
Yes.
and I if that had been in person press conference, he said that's the start of it. I would have said, okay, what else is there to it, right?
Where's
What
the
else
end
did
of
the
it?
film reveal? So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It would have been interesting if you would have been able to answer that one.
mm-hmm.
How do you get better play from Zach Allen? I mean, I
mm,
applauded the move. You and I
yeah,
both talked about it. He's the Draymond Jones replacement, high level player, ascending player, more than just the guy opposite JJ Watt. Um, most games he's been disappointing. There's been some flashes here and there. And yes, there's going to be some stuff, as I pointed out on the post game show. Like sometimes he's not going to be in the box score, but he's going to impact the game.
mm-hmm.
Against the Lions, he didn't impact the game, and he was only in the box score for one quarterback hit.
Yeah.
How do you get better play from Zach Allen?
I mean, I think it's kind of more consistent week to week. I mean, I wonder if a lot of guys on Saturday just kind of caught in a vortex a little bit because it came off of what I thought was a pretty good game for him in Los Angeles.
Yes.
Now, granted, you did have the benefit of going against Easton Stick for a little over half the game, But Zach Allen was playing well when Justin Herbert was out there too, and
Exactly.
so was the entire Bronco front seven. Don't mistake what happened in Los Angeles for being a product of getting Justin Herbert out of the game late in the second quarter. It wasn't that at all. It wasn't that at all. Honestly, like with Zach Allen, it's actually really interesting because, yeah, it's gonna kind of come in. It's gonna kind of come in bursts for him. I think the odds are that he actually rebounds pretty well in this game. I'm less concerned about Zach Allen than you are right now. And stepping back and kind of looking at the big picture of of the season, d- did you know? Did you know he's already hit his career high in quarterback hits
Okay.
for the
Good.
season? Okay,
Good.
he's doing well. Because and we can talk about pressures. I can get the pressure numbers up for you here in a moment, but I'm I'm less concerned about him in the pass rush. The concern is against the run, right?
Hmm.
And again, if they're doubling DJ Jones, Zach's got to win the one-on-one battles. I do wonder something though, and I think it's worth noting in terms of when we talk about this run defense, we cannot avoid talking about the inside linebackers. And I
Right.
wonder if what you're looking at here is teams not as concerned about Josey, Jewell, and Alex Singleton and focusing more not just on DJ Jones, but on getting Zach Allen out of the play and getting away from Zach Allen too.
Right.
Because even though it took a while for him to launch, he's been more consistent against the run over the course of the year than anybody in that front seven. I'd say not named DJ Jones.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Harris has been okay there, but the weak spot for this team, and you brought it up, Mace. I was going to do it for coverage, but it's there for run defense because of the
Yeah,
missed tackles. It's Josey Jewell and Alex
yeah.
Singleton. That's been the weak spot from day one. Fan
It's nothing
favorites, we
personal.
already know. It's never
Nothing personal.
personal. We both like both of them. I really
They're
look forward
good
to talking to
dudes.
Josey Jewell
Yeah.
and Alex Singleton. They usually give us a lot. They're usually kind of fun to be around, like good dudes, but that's the dudes that are getting picked on. And again, if we're talking about fixes, I don't really think there is a fix. You're just riding it because it's not Drew Sanders. Sorry. We'll keep hope for the future for that kid, but it's not Drew Sanders. Not now.
He's not even in the picture
He
at
doesn't know what he's
inside
doing
backer
yet.
now. He at this point, Drew Sanders is a backup edge.
Yep.
That's it. Now, it's a good sign that Nick Benito has not gone on injured reserve, which tells you Nick's coming back sooner rather than later. Maybe not for the Patriots game, but maybe we're talking about him being back on New Year's Eve against the Chargers. So that will help you out.
Which
But
might be Will Greer, by the way. They picked up Will Greer and they might bench
oh,
Easton Stick.
um,
You better win out. You
do
better
you
win out.
remember? Do you remember Will Greer's family being around at Senior Bowl week a few
Oh
years
yeah, yeah. And
ago?
I liked Will Greer. I thought he was a nice
Yeah,
mid-round prospect. Doesn't play with any sort of care for his body. It's kind of like Matt Corral in that way, right? Where it's just
yeah.
like I'm reckless. So yeah, Will Greer was reckless, but yeah, and but his family wasn't around. It wasn't annoying as Connor Cook's family, who would
Oh, that's
call.
a way back.
That's a way back, but they would call. I know a few of my friends that are in, like work for like Sporting News or whatever that
Hmm.
they got calls from
Yep.
Mrs. Cook being like, "Why are you talking bad about my son?" Like I've never experienced that. I did have a Jamarcus Webb's mom email me one
Hmm.
time, but that was years ago.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people connected to prospects that get the rabbit ears out, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
By the
They don't
way,
need that, by the way.
yeah,
They're preparing for the
no,
NFL. They don't. I tell that for
mm,
my friends. It's like someone said something bad about you on Facebook. I don't need to know.
yeah, and I'd say this is why we keep the critiques non-personal and we keep
Hmm.
it
Just on
on foot,
football.
just on football. That's it. Um, I think too many mistakes get made when you start kind of making things personal, right? Um,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and
It's not what we're here for.
you
I want
start
to talk
trying to
about
make
ball.
yeah. I mean, character does matter, but a lot of the character evaluations miss, right? And
Hmm.
honestly, some of those character evaluations that teams have, they're based on flawed methodology, outdated thinking,
Super
right?
outdated thinking.
I mean, I, and we see it every year. Some of the questions these guys get asked, like, Okay, I mean,
Do you have a girlfriend? Is your girlfriend hot? Like
yeah,
we can go there. They ask him a lot of outdated stuff.
yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, the prospects feel pressure to answer them honestly, because you don't want to be labeled as this guy's a troublemaker, right? No, that's what happens. And here's the other thing, and you know this as
Oh,
well as I do. We both know scouts, right? But man, there are gossipy lots. Okay, I
it's
mean,
awesome.
and that's the thing. It's this stuff starts spreading like wildfire
Hmm.
over, over scotch and sodas at Veets and at Prime and in Indianapolis and wherever, and these things just take on a life of their own, and then and then it becomes an unfair part of the discussion
Right.
with these players,
I'll
right?
remind you about the Justin Herbert conversation. Remember, he's an introvert because he just hangs around with his brother. And I
Yeah.
remember scouts telling me with a straight face, like, I'm concerned about him. Like he's not like
Mm.
super calm. And I'm like, it's just a talent, physical wise, which is
Hmm.
all I focus on. Like that's the talent was pretty evident, but there were scouts dinging Justin Herbert because he's quiet.
Yeah.
That's dumb.
Even though his teammates respected him. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
they did at Oregon. They do now in LA,
Hmm.
right? I mean, just because you're introverted doesn't mean you don't have, have everyone having your back in the locker room.
Or have some fire. We've seen Herbert yell at
Oh,
some of his teammates.
yeah.
So, and we know Alex Singleton and Josey Jewell have fire, Mace. I just know that they're under fire and under pressure because
Yeah.
teams are now picking on them.
Under pressure.
Do, 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 do.
Oh
Vanilla
God.
Ice's reasoning for like, well, no, no, there's this do, and
Oh
mine is
come. Oh, don't even get me started on that. Oh.
Oh,
Oh God.
hmm.
But you know what? I mean, if there was a silver lining to that, it was to that whole experience. It was that Vanilla Ice did introduce people to the majesty of Queen and David Bowie. Okay,
Yeah.
so
If you
yeah,
didn't know, well, you knew then.
yes, exactly. I mean, because here's the thing: like I was 14 years old then, and Under Pressure came out when I was like what, five and a half,
Something like that. Yeah.
and it kind of faded into the backwash, and then because of Ice Ice Baby, I went listen like, oh man, this is actually some really good stuff. Because the Queen stuff that I had in my in the you know in the library at the house was all it was you know Night at the Opera, Day at the Races, News of the World, etc. From like that period of time, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
anyway, this is
I
we
still
still
I blame Vanilla Ice for my love of 50 Mustangs. I still want a convertible
rolling
1990
in my 5.0.
with the rag top down so my hair can blow. So
Oh,
Alex Singleton's hair can blow? I mean, we are talking about Alex
hey,
Singleton and that hair.
I wish that he could flow downhill the way that lock of mane that lock flows out the back of his helmet, right? The thing on him, like the spirit is willing, the mind is willing, but it's this is what sometimes the body is just a step too
I think it's
slow.
a style thing.
Yeah,
You've said it, I've said it. Like he's not a downhill guy.
yeah.
You need him to be a downhill guy. And I think Josie's a little bit banged up and he's just a step
Mhm.
slower. And he
Yeah.
didn't have a half a step to lose in the pros.
Yeah, I mean, let's go back to when he was a rookie, and he was going against Antonio Gates, who, by the way, Gates was honored when the Broncos played the Chargers out in L.A. Um, but as I was watching that ceremony, I flashed back to when Gates, who at that point, let's face it, was a few biscuits shy of 300 at that point. Like he was moving, and unfortunately, couldn't keep up.
So Mace, we talked plenty of defense almost for the entire show today. Do
Hmm.
you have any more defense left, or do you want to quickly move to the offense and some fixes we could see there?
I mean, look, the fixes are probably not going to involve much in the way of personnel. Again, I'd like to see more of Elijah Garcia, for example. But I think I think in general, you've got to roll with what you've got. It was as John Fox said, many times in struggling years, he'd say, nobody's coming to save us, right? And so I'll just give you an example here. Fabian Moreau uh, hasn't been good so far this month. In terms of number of relative to the times he's been targeted, the last 3 games, his passer rating when targeted for opposing quarterbacks, 109.7 against Houston, 87.5 against the Chargers, 110.7 against the Lions. Jared Goff threw at him 7
We got
times,
him. Yeah.
6 completions, 74 yards. You're now. I'd say the word is out a little bit. The word should have always been out that, hey, just don't throw it at number 2's side, right? But what was interesting is that most of it did go away from Surtain, but the Lions did make plays at Pat Surtain's expense. It wasn't a great game for number 2 on Saturday night. That's the thing about it. Like, you looked at the defense, you looked at the missed tackles. Missed tackles hadn't been a huge problem for 2 months, right?
Right.
And then it came up again. Pat Surtain, lockdown, they're making plays at his expense.
Right.
It was, you just kind of look at it and you wonder if everybody just kind of got caught. Like I said, I used the word vortex earlier. Everybody got caught in that. And, sometimes it's less about the tactics. It's more about just, okay, we're falling. We're falling. We can't get ourselves back up. And Detroit, with all the weapons the Lions possess on offense, they're not going to let you breathe. They are, like Lions, they pounced. It was they got the Broncos on their heels. I don't believe you have teams going forward that have the same capability, because you just don't have as many weapons. Although, like you said earlier, let's see how Bill Belichick and company use Hunter Henry on Sunday night, because you're trying to set him up against those inside linebackers if you can. But that being said, maybe this is a game. You usually don't have Pat Surtain traveling, but maybe you set up some matchup where Surtain is facing Hunter Henry, because right now, if you're the Broncos, that's who you worry about among the Patriots.
I think you treat Hunter Henry like you treated Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
So Simmons is on him.
The old boxing one where someone is always devoted to Hunter Henry.
We loved Demario Douglas because we saw him at the Shrine Bowl, and I called him 7-Eleven because he was always open. But that rookie's not going to concern you.
Not yet.
Not yet. And Bailey Zappi's not much of a concern. So boxing one on Hunter Henry. Try to box up Zeke. We'll check the Ramondre Stevenson status. I don't think he'll play, but again, it's Tuesday. But and I saw people in the chat room in the post game bringing up Pat Surtain's overrated. I didn't even put it on the screen, Mace, because that's just poppycock. That's Champ Bailey had a bad game against Terrell Owens one time, and he had a bad game against Chad Johnson one time. That doesn't mean Champ Bailey's the best corner of all time, in my opinion. Some days you just get got.
Yeah, it happens, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Sun God. You know what?
It's pretty good.
He was pretty good. Didn't matter who was against him. He was making plays, and that included Pat Surtain. Just the old baseball cliche. Sometimes you just have to tip your cap and move on. I mean, it's unfortunate that we're talking about the Broncos needing help because of that loss, but this is where they are. But the more I'm removed from that game, the less concerned I am about most things. I do share your concern about defending tight ends, and I do share your concern, and I keep talking about the run defense, but I'm, we talked about that when things were going well. That's right. That is the thing here, and I know we probably sound like broken records at times, and maybe we don't celebrate as we get more than one day away from the game. We don't embrace it when it's going well quite the way that others do, but you and I, we did recognize the things that were still problems even when they're going well. And here we are talking about what happened against Detroit.
There's still problems.
Yes, right.
Yep.
You mask deficiencies, but just because you mask them doesn't mean they're not there. It means they do come up at some point. But in this league, it's about how long and how well can you cover them up, and how much can you get games to play to your strengths rather than your weaknesses. Look, if you don't have that strip sack fumble on the Broncos' first offensive series, how do we know we're not talking about that we're not talking about the Broncos taking a lead and the game going on a completely different path where you're not in this type of situation, right? We don't know that. I
The
mean,
vortex won't exist if that
yeah,
play doesn't happen. You
that's
know,
and that's the thing. We really don't know. That's what makes these games so fun
oh,
is that
football's fascinating.
yeah, but it's any sport because it's a butterfly effect from one moment early in terms of how the contest progresses, right? I mean, you've changed. It's like in blackjack, with every card dealt, it's different. With every circumstance, the entire thing changes. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, I figure we get philosophical here before the end of the show because why not?
Why
Um,
not? It's a
kind of what we
Tuesday.
do. Yes,
Now, is it a problem because we're not going to get to offense today? Sorry, everybody. I'll do
we
it
got to a lot
tomorrow.
of offense yesterday. Let's be
Yeah,
fair.
we
Let's.
did a bunch on offense yesterday. Tomorrow I can brain dump when we're at practice, so that'll
Mhm.
be fine.
Yeah.
But is it a concern to you because we've spent 2 days going over problems? Like they can win out, everybody. They
Hmm.
can. I believe they will, honestly. But man alive, that doesn't mean they're without issues.
Yeah, I think what we're saying is that this is a team that is as good as or better than at least half the league, probably more, and they're simply not in that top tier right now. The fact that we're talking about the Broncos having won 6 of the last 8, we're talking about playoff contenders being beaten in among those 6 wins, tells you how far this has come. Now, that being said, are they going to, let's say they win the next 3 but don't make the playoffs? Let's say that's that 25% scenario where they win out, but at 10-7 lose tiebreakers and you're done on January the 6th or January the 7th, right? Um, do you pick right immediately up where you left off last year? I, you know what? I'm not sure. It's going to depend on what decisions are made in the off season.
And how's it look? How do these next 3 games look? You
Yeah.
know?
What happens at quarterback, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
look, it's possible that there is a step backward in the short term to take steps forward. And they may involve the quarterback position, right?
Yep.
So we'll see. I mean, we don't we don't know. I'll say this: the Broncos did not take advantage of a fairly benign start to the season with Las Vegas and then Washington. And
Right.
if you have a regret about this year, it's right there,
Yep.
right there. They opened 0-3, but specifically 0-2 at home. That's one where you kind of want to have back. And honestly, now you kind of look back and say, maybe you wish you would have started with things a little tougher than those first 2 games. Because man, it would have been nice to have Washington rather than Detroit this past weekend.
Yes. Yeah. It would have been
Hmm.
different. A lot
Yeah.
different on the schedule as
So,
they're not benching Sam Howell yet.
well, that's going to be
Even
for a
though
new coach
Jacoby
to
Brissett
decide.
looked better when he came in last week.
Yeah, that's going to be for a new coach to decide. And you
Yep.
know, we did see Desmond Ritter benched by the Falcons, talking about recent day 2, day 3 quarterbacks. Ritter's out. They're back to Taylor Heineke. To me, this puts the Falcons in the Justin Fields conversation this coming off season.
Hmm.
I mean, shoot though, I'm gonna put it to you frankly here. If the Broncos move on from Russell Wilson, do you think they should inquire about Justin Fields? Could he run a Sean Payton offense?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
He he would have to change though. He would have to modify his game, be a bit more functional from the pocket. That's the concern that is the concern I have, is whether you could kind of grow him to that level. But if you do move on from Wilson, I think you're going to be kind of in a, okay, what's the solution? You know, there's a lot of possibilities. I would say one thing that maybe isn't possible, and this is because of the cap constraints you're going to have, is if Minnesota moves on from Kirk Cousins, which I think a lot of people expect them to do.
Right.
Um, Someone's going to give Cousins a contract that probably the Broncos, if they move on from Russell Wilson and they have that, and they have $85 million of dead money over 2 years, it's probably something the Broncos can't do, right? But then you're also looking at the cost benefit analysis, right? Can you get Jameis Winston for $8 million a year to do that? Jameis Winston, and then you see where Jarrett Stidham goes. Is it Jarrett Stidham and then a rookie that you're developing? I mean, who knows? Who knows? Who knows?
Always uncertain is the
Russ has still
future.
got 3 weeks plus maybe the playoffs to figure
Hmm.
this out. This is a full season evaluation. We're not through the full season. Yes, we are looking over the horizon a little bit, but there is still room and time for Wilson to consolidate his position as the Broncos quarterback.
The only bad thing is the last two games they've went to him, they've lost. They needed him in Houston, and not just the last play, but that game set up to attack Houston secondary. Detroit's defense is weak,
Mhm.
and they look like the 85 Bears out there. Um,
Yeah.
84 Bears were pretty good too. Everyone always forgets 84. And 86, they were pretty good too.
86, they actually had better defensive metrics than 85 with Vince
Hmm.
Tobin as the defensive coordinator. Um, that's sort of the little known fact about this is we celebrate the 85 team, but the 86 defense might have actually been better. But the but and this is the thing, two things happened. One, you had quarterback injuries. You know, if Charles Martin doesn't ragdoll Jim McMahon to the turf at Soldier Field, okay, now we're in the Wayback Machine, but we're later in the show. I don't care.
Right.
Okay. You remember that. I remember that. Probably, I'm going to imagine a lot of the audience maybe wasn't even alive for that. But I mean, this was violent. Like, after a hit, just threw him down. But the thing is, like, Martin had a towel where he had numbers of like players, and like would put like a Ghostbuster style slash through,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like one of them was number 9. Like this dude literally on his towel had a hit list. Okay,
Yep.
he was punished and justifiably so. I mean, the, the other thing, like Jim McMahon, everyone's punky QB and all that. The thing that goes unremembered is how many injuries that he suffered, like how much
Right.
he had to cope with. Like in 84, his season ended because of a lacerated kidney. I kid you not, right? That was his injury, right?
Hmm.
There was something every year. And so I remember just being 10-year-old Mace, knowing McMahon's injury history and watching him get slammed to the turf. And I mean, you're just
It's
horrified.
gruesome. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
gruesome.
like watching, I mean, it's like, oh my God, like, you know, I still like, if I ever bumped into Charles Martin for whatever reason, I'm like, dude, what were you doing? Why? How could you do that? I
You
mean,
big jerk.
yeah. Anyway, so because of that, by the playoffs is Doug Flutie. Doug Flutie eventually became a very good pro quarterback, right?
Hmm.
We saw
Yeah.
it in Buffalo in 1986. Just his first NFL season, he was not there, right? And so in that, you had in the playoffs, they played Washington. You had a combination of Doug Flutie basically being dared to throw, great game plan by Washington defensive coordinator Richie Pettibon. And the other thing was Jay Schrader, the quarterback for Washington then, he had a very good set of receivers. It was the embryonic stages of what would become the posse. Eventually you know, Art Monk, Ricky Sanders, Gary Clark, they'd all be 1,000-yard receivers. They'd all be really effective. At that point, it was Ricky Sanders still kind of young and growing, and then you had Art Monk, and you had Art Monk, and then you also had Gary Clark. But what they did was it was a lot of vertical plays. It was a lot of going deep, and that exploited the Bears because the Bears were blitzing like mad, right?
Right.
And so It was Schrader knowing he was going to get hit and just bombing it to those
Chucking it up
receivers
there.
in single coverage and winning the matchups, which, by the way, you know what? If you do that right, it's something that can work for the Broncos too. You know, you accept that they're coming in and there might be a hit there, but just throw it up. Trust Courtland
Trust
Sutton.
your receivers.
Trust your receivers. So anyway, if you see more blitzes coming forward, it's old school, but here's the thing. In football, there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, you see, if you're dazzled by what Miami is doing, Mike McDaniel's ripping stuff off from 1940s vintage playbooks, right?
Right.
He's not ripping it off. He's repackaging it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing. Like this game, there's so many layers to it. And so much has transpired that you can borrow elements from the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the beauty of our
And you
sports.
can
They've been
change
around
it.
long enough.
Andy Reid took what Jones did and he put it diagonally for Tyreek Hill specifically. But like that's just June Jones stuff that he repurposed. And it worked.
Yeah. That's a good place to leave this show on. A little football history here. I like that.
I like that as well. It is Orange and Blue today. We're growing the YouTube channel. We really appreciate your guys' help. We need some more help. So please like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. And we are here for you. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying OBT's BFD. Thanks. Stay tuned and stay frosty.